Thank you so much, Rob. What an honor and a privilege to gather with you tonight. I was just reflecting on Easter and what it means for us as we begin to engage with our city. And as Rob said, I'll tell you a little of what we're currently engaging with in our particular location. But just the idea of Easter being the possibility to bring new life to the city and to the whole city, and what that begins to look like in our various spheres of influence. And can I say that you must really love your city, that you would give up a glorious Friday night. That doesn't happen very often, certainly not where I'm from. It doesn't happen very often for you to begin to think about how do we begin to unleash the original design of our city? How do we begin to bring the city into the life that God has for it and that He intended all along for it to have? I should make a couple of confessions here. The first one is this, that when we started our church community, our faith community that we lead in Coleraine, I didn't really have an expansive, generous heart towards the city. That's just a confession for you. My basic goal was to create a church that could survive. That was where my thinking was in those days. I had less concern for city formation and a lot of concern for church formation. I'm very thankful that God has broken in on that thinking, and our greater concern now is how do we begin to create a city that's formed in a way that supplies the destiny of its citizens and the role that the church has to play within that. And what I'd love to explore with you tonight, and it is an exploration, we're practitioners in this, we're learning all the time, making incredible mistakes, finding a very forgiving community that we're part of. What I'd love to explore with you tonight is how do we learn to become fathers in our city? How do we play the role within our city that unleashes our city into its potential? Now, I have to make a second confession, which is that my city is not a city. So that's a big confession, really, in that it's a small town, but thinking biblically in every way it is a city. It's a place of diversity and vibrancy. It's a place where education and media and the arts and politics begin to fuse together. It's a place of learning and growth and challenge and change. And in every biblical context, it is a city, even though it doesn't have that kind of jurisdiction or title. It functions in that way. And I want to talk about how do we begin to bring life to the city. And again, just finally to say, by way of introduction, I spent the first 10 years, our church has been going about 12 years now, I spent the first 10 years thinking how to build a great church. And I wouldn't at all say that we've done that, but I've spent the last 2 years thinking how do we build a great city. And my hope for you guys at Rathmines Trinity Church would be that that would be your preoccupation, because I believe as you intentionally cultivate a heart for the city, the church inevitably grows. But if you do it the other way, you might just miss the whole thing. If you intentionally grow the church, sometimes you miss what God is doing in the city. I wouldn't be me if I didn't read a little bit out of the Bible. Is that legal? Can I do that with you? So here it is. I'm going to read from a guy who spoke at a time of deep recession, a time of incredible brokenness, a time of fractured identity, a time when people were leaving the city in droves, and this was his statement. But now take another look. I'm going to give this city a thorough renovation, working a true healing inside and out. I'm going to show them life whole, brimming with blessings. I'll restore everything that was lost in this city. I'll build everything back as good as new. I'll clean them from the inside out for all that they've done against me. I'll forgive everything that they have done wrong. And this city will be a center of joy and praise and glory for all the countries on earth. Wouldn't that be amazing if people said that about Dublin? That this city would be a center of joy and glory and praise. They'll get reports on all the good that I'm doing for her. They'll be in awe of all the blessings. The time is coming. You're going to hear laughter and celebration, marriage festivities, people explaining, thank God of the angel armies. He's so good. His love never quits. I'll make everything as good as new. I, God, say so. And the motto for this city will be, God has set things right for us. And when I read that a couple of years ago, I thought, that's what I want the motto of my city to be. I want it to be that God has set things right in our city. I want it to be impossible to come into our city and not be filled with infectious joy. So how do we begin to bring life to our city? Let's just for a moment pause and think of Good Friday and Easter Sunday. Good Friday is the model of Jesus sacrificing himself for the sake of the city. And one of the things, when we think about the interplay between culture and the gospel, we think of a community laying its life down for the sake of the city, serving behind the scenes, washing the feet of the city, in sacrificial love, having some kind of authority within the city, where the city begins to look to that culture for solutions. One of the stories that we just heard today, actually, I just heard it today, was, you may not know this, but in the north, there's a little bit of contention around parades. Are you aware of this? It's just a small issue that we have where we're from. We're working it through. Well, this, in a few weeks' time, do you know when it is, Neil? It's this Friday coming. So it's next Friday. There's a parade in our city. And this week, the police called us and they said, there's a band parade coming next Friday. Would you come to it? And would you do anything? Would you just give out lollipops or one of those things that you do? Because we know that if you're there, the atmosphere around it changes. And when your city is inviting you in to bring a solution, albeit with lollipops, to where it's facing an issue that is unresolvable, the police don't know how to resolve the issue, you know that you're beginning to connect the interplay between gospel and culture. And I'll talk to you a lot more about our partnership with the police and how that works and various other agencies. But we're beginning. Jesus made a strange statement. He said, you're the light of the world. And for years, I always thought that was a statement of piety. You know, you're really holy. Just maybe turn to your neighbor and say, you're really holy and pure. You're as pure as the driven slush. He said, you're the light of the world. But what I realized is this: the purpose of light isn't simply to dispel darkness, it's to reveal design. Light reveals design. When you think of light in the city, you think of light revealing the design of that city. You think of artists who are alive to their full capacity. You think of engineers creating structures. You think of educators, or as they call them in South Korea, nation builders, who know that they got in to teach children to supply their destiny. You begin to think of light revealing the design across the board in the city. And one of the questions that we have is this. One of the questions that we wrestle with the implications of is, how do we begin to bring life to our city? And what does that begin to look like? And I thought I'd kind of share this with you through the parable of the prodigal son. Is that vaguely familiar story to you? Because just up front on this, it's impossible to bring life to the city while we're avoiding the city. And I don't know about you, but I kind of, for years, explored church in a way that disengaged from the city. Our model for church was John the Baptist. A voice in the wilderness. Avoiding reality, eating locusts and what else? Just strange stuff. That was the model, and the church was to be like that, completely separate, really critiquing, condemning, complaining. You know, like we'll correct everything, but we won't engage with it. That was kind of John the Baptist model. And I kind of grew up with that model, and I don't mean at all to be offensive in that, but I grew up with that model of the church postured in a way that's afraid of the city, almost intimidated by the culture, kind of wondering to itself, what is our role in the culture? We have to survive and we have to preserve our morality and all those things, and that's somewhat helpful. But there is a different model, and the other model is the model of Jesus, who engaged fully in the life of the city. And if you like, that first model is the model of the elder brother, isn't it? The elder brother would never dream of engaging in city life. What he likes to do is critique those who are in the city. You know, look at the politicians, they don't do enough for us. Or look at the school system, it's an absolute mess. And the elder brother sits at home and he critiques those. Look at the media, they never print anything that's true. And the elder brother just sits and they critique. And that's a very safe space to be in, isn't it? But it isn't actually what we're called to do in the city. And for far too long, we've been afraid of the culture. But the truth is, avoidance of the city separates us from our inheritance in the city. The gospel was made for culture. You only truly understand the gospel when you engage with culture. And can I flip that around and say you only truly understand culture when you engage with the gospel? Those two things are intrinsically linked. And it's time, perhaps, I suggest to you, maybe for discussion, that perhaps it's time for us to throw away this insulation from culture and this avoidance of culture and this kind of elder brother mentality and recognize that there's a different approach to the city. Instead of retreating into a cultural ghetto, when I'm chatting with guys, my church tradition, if that's a valid expression, is in a kind of Pentecostal, charismatic dimension, somewhere out there. And for years, we thought that creativity meant waving flags. Oh boy, this is a creative church. Look at the doves and the banners and all that. That was our scope for it. But you know what? Creativity is coming to a place like this and witnessing the art, or the Museum of Art just beside the Hilton and over there, is going there, or it's putting something on in our city where artists have designed the most incredible things and inviting people into it. Creativity in the church is not where we do strange dances. It's where we put on theatrical performances that are the talk of the town. It's where we have artistic expressions, and sculptors and poets are welcome, and they begin to shape the heritage and the life of the city from the center. We don't have to live afraid of the city. We can't bring life to the city by avoiding the city, but equally we can't bring life to the city by becoming the city. And this was the younger brother's thing, wasn't it? That he went into the city and he took what, again, I confess has been my approach to the city, where he pillaged its resources, really. He exploited the city. He took what he could from it, enjoyed it all, enjoyed every resource that the city had to offer, some of which you just heard about there. He took all of that and he spent it on himself. He was a consumer, is what he was. And often that's been the approach of church and gospel in the city, that the city exists so we can have converts, so that we can go in and take what we need from the city. But what if there was a whole different approach? What if instead of becoming like the city, what if we didn't opt for cultural relevance? And again, I'd love for you to discuss this, but what if we avoided cultural avoidance, and what if simultaneously we avoided cultural relevance? What if we said, actually, we don't want to be relevant to the culture, because the truth is, unless it's unique to where we are, our culture needs solutions, and becoming like the culture isn't going to get us the solutions that we need. We need to bring some different thinking to the issues that we're facing. And what if instead of trying to be like the culture, we offered an alternative? What if the church actually became the church and raised up its voice confidently, not arrogantly, but confidently in the heart of culture, and began to tell a different story of what it might look like? What if instead of being the younger brother consuming the resources of the city, we became like the father? Because fathers have a very different approach. Any of you parents in the room? Yeah? How many of you know as a parent you carry incredible responsibility and authority, as well as sleeplessness and weariness and all of that stuff, yeah? How many of you know that as a parent, your authority exists to supply the destiny of your child? My authority exists to supply my kids' destiny, to help them understand who they are and launch them into that destiny. When we think of being fathers in the city, what we realize is simply this, that everyone in our city is called to supply the destiny of the city. So I just want to stretch your thinking for a moment. Where I used to be in this was that the church supplies the destiny of the city. That's where I used to be. Where I am now is here. The artists supply the destiny of the city, and the educators supply the destiny of the city, and the politicians supply the destiny of the city, and the preachers and teachers supply the destiny of the city, and the scientists and the health professionals supply the destiny of the city. And across the board, there are people collaboratively working within the culture who are helping the city come into its unique design. And one of the things that does when we get a hold of that, when our mindset begins to shift, is we realize as a church that we're called to city formation. Not just formation of individuals, but formation of our city, and to create a healthier city. And we do that in partnership with our city, and we refuse to exploit our city. And I just want to share a couple of examples with you in that. I'm conscious of time. But I want to share a couple of examples with you in that, where we're no longer afraid or in awe of culture, but where we're creating within that particular culture. Let's take education, for example. In education in our particular locality, for a long time we saw schools as places where kids could come to meet Jesus. Just being real honest. Confessions of a bad pastor. You have it right there. We looked at the schools and thought, lots of young people can't escape, great place to tell them all about Jesus. Stuck in there all day. Yep. We go in and tell them about Jesus and they might give their life to him. That was our basic thesis on schools work. And then we realized, actually, there's a whole different way to view partnership in schools. And we began to think, what would it look like if we actually believed in our school system? What would it look like if as a church we came on a Good Friday mentality and said, we're here to serve. We don't actually mind if we tell you about Jesus or not. We just want to serve. And we came to schools in our city and we said, we'd like to serve. And you know what? They were deeply distrusting of us, and well, they should have been. Well, they should have been. And they deeply distrusted us, but after a while, we built enough relationship and enough equity to say, we just want to serve. And I don't know if you know this, I think it's true here, that schools need money. And I meet with principals all the time whose biggest dilemmas right now is which staff members they're going to have to let go. Principals are wondering, how do I make the costs work? And we met with one of them. They'd just been given a grant to do schools breakfasts. We started saying, you know what, we'll send our interns. Those are some people who volunteer their time. We'll send them in and they'll serve your students. And we said to our interns, you're not under any circumstances allowed to talk about Jesus. We want you to serve breakfast and smile. So that's what they did, and they engaged with that. It wasn't that we were ashamed of Jesus, we just wanted to serve the school. We began to do that, and I know some of you know this story. But as we journeyed that with the school, they began to talk to us about other things. And what they effectively asked is if we would come and be playground mentors. And our first question in that is that legal? Because you know that there's so much child protection stuff. How does that work? You're going to let us come into the school, stand in the playground, and the kids come talk to us, and there's no... How does all of that work? And they said, don't worry, we can solve all of that. Would you just come and do that? And so our guys would go into the school. Where's Neil? Yeah, you go into the school and you stand there and the kids verbally assault you and abuse you. Yeah, that's basically the guts of it. And they take it and they smile and engage with the kids, and that's kind of how it works. And all the time we're building rapport with the school. And we're doing it not because of anything other than we want the school to succeed. Because schools supply the destiny of young people. And if our schools didn't do that, we'd be in big trouble. Well, in January this year, when it came to the open night for schools where the primary sevens go up into their secondary school, the schools that we were working in invited our guys there to be part of that open night. And what they would do is people came in with their kids and their entourages. They would say, this is Mr. Clark, for example, the geography teacher. And this is Neil Young, which happens to be his real name, much to the B&B owner's chagrin. This is Neil Young, and he helps us provide pastoral care for your child. And the school was just openly acknowledging, we have people who are helping provide pastoral care, and it happens to be a church. So much so that when the school began to look at what they were doing with that, when one of the pupils was expelled, they had I don't know if you know what happens when a pupil gets expelled from school, but essentially 18 people gathered in a room, educational psychologists, teachers, the whole thing. They all gathered in a room, no idea what to do with this young boy. He had taken a knife to his mother's throat. They had no idea what to do with him. And after 4 or 6 hours, their commendation was, why don't we get the vineyard to work with them once a week, and we'll pay them to do it. And we said, you know what, we don't want your money. That's not, we love Matthew. And if we can help, we'd love to help. We love our city. We do whatever it takes to help. And slowly, it's shifting educationally. This year, we're looking at putting people into classrooms. My point is this, that the school system matters in our city. Just as much as individual people coming to faith, the school system matters to God. Let me give you another example in that, because I believe that the church is tasked by God to bring solutions to the city. If we really do believe that God is supernatural and has wisdom, we should have some innovations and creativity about us. People should be saying, where did you get this wisdom? Yeah. But how do you do these things? And we should be saying, we have no idea. And we really don't have any idea. Recently, with the police, we have a lot of abused and battered women who come to our church. And recently, the police put on a whole barbecue for it. But here was the thing. Somebody in the police thought this would be a great idea, and then he realized, how do we look after all their kids? So the police called up our church, and they said, we're throwing a barbecue for battered women because we want to do a drive against domestic violence. It's the #1 call-out issue in our community, and we want to do a drive against it. And they said, would you provide the kids workers for the barbecue? And we're like, oh, we would love to do that. So 80 battered women, about 120 kids pitch up. We serve burgers and all of that stuff, and we didn't think anything. Incidentally, I'm not telling you these stories so you think how great we are. I'm showing you examples of church working in city. That's all I'm trying to do in that. So we were serving all the stuff to them. Didn't think any more of it until Christmas time. We got another call from the police, and they said, you know, at this time of year, people's houses get burgled all the time, and we're putting little, did they do this? Rathmines and parts of Dublin, put a little leaflet through your door to say, make sure you don't leave valuables around where thieves and burglars, you know, that kind of optimistic Christmas message where thieves and burglars can break in and all that. And they said to us, do you have any message for the people in this area of the town? Can we put through your leaflets through their door? We're like, what? This is the police calling us to see if they can distribute our material. Like, this is just what's wrong with this picture. And it's a picture of relationship because they know, just as we know, we couldn't do what we do without them, and they know, they're starting to realize, actually, there's a connection here. We're both serving our city in different ways, but we're doing it together. And what that looks like, it looks like bringing creativity, it looks like bringing a solution. Recently, I met with a man, and I was saying, you know, God said, call to me and I'll answer you and tell you great and unsearchable things you don't know. And I said, what that means is he knows things that you can't Google. And he knows things about business that you don't know, and ask him and he'll tell you about business. Well, he actually believed what I said. On the Wednesday, he met with a business. He's a chartered accountant, and I met with him the following week. And he said, Alan, I spoke with 2 guys this week, and I saved their company $70 million. He said, God gave me an idea, and it saved the company $70 million. And I said, Glenn, I bet they liked you. And he said, oh, they really did. They really did. Like, you won't find a businessman alive who doesn't like it when you have a solution that saves their company $70 million. God knows things. He's really smart. You know? He's really smart. As we like to say in our place, you won't have a better idea than him. You don't have a better idea than him. It works in business. And then lastly, because I'm, again, aware of the time, I just want to talk about my favorite area in this, and it's the whole area of healthcare and where we are. I think the last time I was with you guys a couple of weeks ago there, I talked to you just about what's happening in that area. We have after our church service on a Sunday, and we do it deliberately after the service. You know, we don't do it, we do it at 2 o'clock when our people have all gone, because we don't want the poor to think that we're giving them food so they'll come to our church. So we make sure that everybody's gone, and then we just put out food for the poor. And we have about 60 people who gather there every week, and they got just the best food. It is just wonderful stuff. And we've been doing that for a while now. And I'm just thinking through, okay, how else can we address the needs of homelessness and poverty? How can we tackle poverty in our doorstep? What does that look like? And we knew that we were meeting a need in the city. We knew that. That was clear. We knew that we were helping the poor. We knew that we were releasing compassion in the church. We're just wondering about how does the gospel continue to connect with culture in these ways. And one of the girls in our church, there's a thing in the UK at the minute, I don't know if you're driving it here, called the Big Society, where the government is saying we are relying upon increasingly community and voluntary sector agencies to deliver community services. And David Cameron, who's our Prime Minister, he kind of that was his manifesto, so he was driving that hard. And one of the things that we thought is, okay, is there anything that we could do in the area of healthcare? And we have a couple of GPs who advise the government on different issues, and they decided, what if we put a doctor's surgery in our church? So for the last couple of weeks or a couple of months now, we've explored the idea where the National Health Service, it actually is a National Health Service provision, come to our church on the Sunday after church, and they do checkups for the poor. It's just the best thing. So we recently discovered a man had diabetes for years. He's been able to go back to his doctor, get all of that sorted, and of course, it's totally free healthcare. That goes without saying. But the point is simply this, that suddenly we're saving our GP's money, and we're saving our hospital's money. And in the last month or so, last month, our council gave us an award. And here's what they said to us, and this for me is the fusion of gospel and culture. They were holding their annual awards for different things in the community. And then they said, we have an additional award to give, and we don't even have a category for it. But we just want to give this award, and we want to give it to the Vineyard for what they're doing in the Sunday food giveaway. And our guys collected it, and we didn't think any more. And then last week, the Chamber of Commerce called us, and they said, would you apply for an award? Which was their way of saying, we'd like to give you an award, but legally we can't do it until you apply for this award. And the Chamber of Commerce was saying, we just recognize what you're bringing in the city. And please, I don't say that in any way. I really don't say that in any way that you would think, gosh, what they're doing is great and all that. I say that to you because it's possible to engage in city formation. That the gospel transforms culture. That what God has given to us really does bring a solution to the hurt and the pain in our community, and it's right across the board. So here's my final appeal to you in this. If you're an artist, please don't give up your art to become a vicar. Lead your city through art. If you're a teacher, please don't give up education because you think there's a holier calling. Can I say to you, there's nothing holier than building the confidence of a child and speaking into their design and their destiny and letting them fly. If you're an engineer, by God's grace, have great ideas that would cause the world to look and wonder. Ask God for wisdom around that. Please don't think, oh, the best that I could do is become a small group leader in my church. But be the best engineer that you can possibly be for the glory of God. If you're a scientist, please don't be someone who thinks my science and my faith disconnect, but realize you stand in the line of a rich vein of history where some of the greatest scientists the world has ever seen have been endowed with wisdom from above, most of them believers, bringing incredible breakthrough into diseases that were ravaging whole people groups. And why wouldn't you be one of those? Why wouldn't you be somebody who releases that into the community? If you're a business person here, can I issue an apology to you on behalf of the wider church and be very presumptuous in doing this? But I am very sorry that the church has looked at you as a cash cow, that your only usage is that you earn money and you give it to church. Can I say to you, we need your business and your entrepreneurship more than ever. The innovation that you bring within our city is required in these days. And if you're a business person, please lead businesses with integrity, lead them in a way that brings employment and tackles poverty in families, and unleash God-given design into your business. And if you are somebody who's involved in church, can I issue this plea to you? That you cease trying to build his church. Because Jesus said, I will build my church. So it's not your job, it's his job. But would you become someone who goes into the culture with a message of generous hope and expansive love, and you begin to wash the feet of your city, and you stoop real low? Because can I conclude by saying this, that in the Bible, compassion and authority are two sides of the same coin. When you stoop low in the city, God gives you authority in the city. When you wash the feet of the city, you find yourself with favor all over the city. And you don't do it to get the favor, but when you do it, you can't stop the favor. And that's the collision for us in a very practitioner way of what happens when the gospel and culture collide. So I hope that's helpful.